Do astronauts shower in space? Hello, curious minds. Okay, here's a midnight question that's been floating around in my head for a while. How do astronauts shower in space? I mean, they spend months up there, so surely they need to keep clean somehow, right? But then again, there's no gravity up there. So, how would water even work? Would they be able to shower at all? Let's dive into the somewhat quirky but fascinating world of astronaut hygiene and figure out exactly how they keep themselves clean in the weightless environment of space. Spoiler alert, showering in space is not as straightforward as you might think. Let's start with a little space history. In the early days of space travel, particularly during the Apollo missions, hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority. Astronauts were on shorter missions, so there wasn't really a need for full on showers. They relied on simple hygiene methods like wet towels to wipe themselves down. Glamorous, right? But as space missions became longer and more astronauts started spending extended periods in space, the question of cleanliness became more important. During the Skylab missions in the 1970s, NASA actually tried to figure out how astronauts could shower in space. Skylab was the first space station operated by NASA, and it came equipped with a shower that was essentially a sealed cylinder with a hose that sprayed water. The water would float around in granules, so astronauts had to use their air current to keep the water off their face and body. Sounds like a fun experiment in space. But here's the catch. It took 2 hours for the astronauts to shower, clean up, and then clean the equipment afterwards. The water didn't drain properly, the whole process was messy, and it used a lot of precious water. So, while astronauts technically could shower in space back then, it was more of a hassle than it was worth. Fast forward to today, and things have changed. The International Space Station, or ISS, doesn't have a shower, and astronauts no longer attempt full on showers during their missions. Instead, they've embraced a simpler and more efficient hygiene routine. After all, when you're orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles per hour, who has the time for a 2 hour shower? So, how do they stay clean? Astronauts use rinse free wipes, waterless shampoo, and special no rinse body wash. They squeeze water out of pouches or wet cloths and rub it over their bodies. Since there's no gravity in space, water doesn't flow or fall the way it does on Earth. Instead, it forms little floating blobs that stick to your skin, which makes the whole process a bit tricky. Without gravity, water can be surprisingly dangerous. In space, liquid droplets don't just fall, they float around, and if a blob of water gets into your nose or mouth, it can cause serious problems with breathing. That is why astronauts are super careful when using water and rely on minimal amounts for hygiene. There are a few reasons why showering in space is impractical. Without gravity, water doesn't flow down like it does on Earth. Instead, it floats around in blobs, sticking to everything, including you. Managing water in zero gravity is a nightmare. And the last thing astronauts want is floating droplets of water getting into equipment or electronics. Water is a precious resource on the ISS. It's not easy to transport large amounts of water to space, so astronauts have to be extremely conservative with it. That means no long showers. Instead, they focus on using as little water as possible for personal hygiene. In a weightless environment, the air circulation system on the ISS is crucial for keeping the cabin livable. Introducing too much water or humidity into the air can mess with the system and cause issues with condensation, which can be harmful to both astronauts and their equipment. Hair washing is another interesting challenge in space. Astronauts use waterless shampoo, which is the same stuff you would use if you are camping or need to wash your hair without a shower. They apply it to their hair, massage it in, and then wipe it off with a towel. In a fun video from the ISS, astronaut Karen Nieberg demonstrated how she washes her long hair in space. She squeezed out some water, let it float around for a bit, then carefully massaged it into her scalp, using a towel to dry her hair afterwards. It's a far cry from Earth-style hair washing, but it works. Now, let's imagine for a moment that you could take a shower in space. First, you'd need some sort of water containment system to keep the water from floating away. Maybe a fancy shower stall like they used in Skylab, but even then, it would be tricky to actually rinse yourself off. With no gravity, the water wouldn't fall over you like a regular shower. It would just cling to your body in droplets. You would have to spend a lot of time carefully wiping the water off, using air currents or even a vacuum to collect it. And afterwards, you would need to dry yourself and make sure that no water droplets escaped into the air. Let's just say it's not the relaxing shower you are used to back on Earth. So, to answer today's midnight question, no, astronauts don't shower in space. And they haven't really since the early space days. It's just too complicated, messy, and water intensive. Instead, they rely on other methods to keep themselves clean during their time on the ISS. While it might sound a little rough, astronauts have adapted well to this system. After all, when you are floating above the Earth and conducting science experiments in zero gravity, a quick wipe down is good enough. That's all for today's episode of Midnight Question. I hope you enjoyed this peek into astronaut hygiene. If you've got more weird questions keeping you up at night, leave them in the comments and we'll explore them in a future episode. Until next time, stay curious and maybe appreciate your next shower just a little bit more. I'm Mari and this is Midnight Question.